The signal came through on a cold morning in the year 2247, when Captain Jake Morrison was drinking coffee in his quarters aboard the UESC Valiant. The communications officer, Danny Cole, rushed to find him with wide eyes and shaking hands, because humanity had just received its first message from an alien species. The message was simple and desperate, and it spoke of a dying ship and people who needed help or they would all perish in the darkness of space. Jake Morrison was a military man with 15 years of service, and he had dreamed of this moment since he was a boy watching the stars from his backyard in Colorado. First contact was supposed to be beautiful and historic and full of hope for the future. The message translator worked slowly because the aliens used mathematics and basic physics to communicate, and after 2 hours the full message became clear. A species called the Velcrin had suffered engine failure and their colony ship was dying, and 200 souls were trapped with failing life support and no way to repair the damage. Earth Command gave the orders within 6 hours, and the Valiant was chosen for the rescue mission because they were the closest ship to the coordinates. Jake gathered his crew of 200 in the main assembly hall and told them they were about to make history. Chief Engineer Lisa Ward stood at attention with her red hair tied back and her green eyes bright with excitement. Tactical Officer Greg Hansen checked his weapons one more time because he was the cautious type who trusted actions more than words. Medical Director Karen Phillips prepared her teams and gathered every medical supply they had because nobody knew what alien biology would need. Danny Cole downloaded every translation protocol and communication system Earth had developed because talking to aliens was going to be the hardest part. The journey took 3 days at maximum speed, and the crew could barely sleep because everyone knew they were about to meet beings from another world. The younger officers talked about what the Velcrin might look like, and whether they would be friendly, and if humanity would finally learn they were not alone in the universe. The older crew members, like Jake Morrison, were more cautious because space was dangerous and unknowns could kill you faster than any weapon. They arrived at the coordinates and found the Velcrin ship floating dead in space like a ghost. The vessel was enormous and made the Valiant look like a toy in comparison. The hull was dark metal that seemed to absorb light, and the architecture was strange with curves and angles that human engineers would never design. Scans showed life signs aboard, but the readings jumped around like the sensors could not get a clear picture. The ship had damage across multiple sections, and the engine core was dark and cold. Lisa Ward studied the scans in the engineering bay and felt something wrong in her gut. She had been working with ships since she was 16 years old, and she knew what engine damage looked like. This damage seemed too perfect and too organized, like someone had carefully disabled each system in exactly the right way. She reported her concerns to Captain Morrison, but they both knew the mission had to continue because you could not abandon people who needed help based only on a feeling. Jake ordered a boarding party, and Greg Hansen volunteered to lead 20 Marines onto the alien vessel. They suited up in full combat gear because protocols demanded it, even though everyone hoped they would not need weapons. The Marines carried medical supplies and repair equipment and translation devices as they crossed through the airlock into the Velcrin ship. The interior was dark and cold, and the corridors were too wide, like they were built for beings much larger than humans. Greg led his team deeper into the ship, and they found signs of damage everywhere. Supplies were scattered across the floors, and wall panels hung open, showing burned circuits and broken conduits. The air was thin but breathable, and the temperature was just above freezing. Then they found the Velcrin themselves in what looked like a shelter area near the center of the ship. The aliens were tall and covered in scales that shimmered with faint blue light. They had 4 arms and large eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness, and when they moved it was with a grace that seemed almost liquid. The Velcrin leader came forward slowly and made gestures that seemed like pleading. The translation devices worked hard to make sense of the alien language, and after several minutes basic communication was possible. The Velcrin called their leader Shepard Vorn, and he explained through broken words and hand signals that their ship had been sabotaged by rivals, and they had been drifting for months with diminishing supplies. The story was heartbreaking, and the Marines could see the Velcrin looked weak and malnourished and desperate. Captain Morrison made the decision to commit full resources to the rescue. Medical teams transferred to the Harvester's Dawn, which was the name the Velcrin gave their ship. Engineers, including Lisa Ward, began examining the alien engines to see if repairs were possible. Supply officers started distributing food and medicine and water to the Velcrin, who accepted everything with what seemed like genuine gratitude. Humanity was proving itself as a compassionate species, and everyone felt proud to be part of this historic moment. Danny Cole monitored communications from his station on the Valiant and tried to learn more about Velcrin language and culture from their ship's computers. He found something strange in the third hour of the rescue operation. There were encrypted signals coming from the Harvester's Dawn that were sent on frequencies the Velcrin should not be able to access with their supposedly damaged systems. The signals were directed toward deep space in a tight beam that suggested military precision. Danny reported this to Captain Morrison immediately, and alarms started going off in Jake's mind. Jake increased security protocols but decided to continue the mission because starting an interstellar incident based on suspicious signals could destroy any chance of peaceful relations. He ordered Greg Hansen to keep his Marines alert and ready for anything. Lisa Ward was deep in the Velcrin engineering section when she discovered the truth that would change everything. She opened a panel that should have contained a burned-out power relay and found instead a perfectly functional system running on standby mode. She checked another damaged section and found the same thing. Every system that appeared broken was actually fine and carefully hidden beneath fake damage. Lisa tried to activate her communication device to warn the Valiant, but a four-armed hand covered her mouth from behind, and another hand grabbed her wrist with impossible strength. She struggled, but the Velcrin holding her was far stronger than any human, and she felt something press against her neck before the world went dark and she knew nothing more. The trap was sprung at 3 in the morning by ship time when most of the human crews were resting between shifts. The Velcrin moved like trained soldiers instead of desperate refugees, and they had weapons that appeared from hidden compartments throughout their ship. The humans were scattered across the Harvester's Dawn in small groups, and they were overwhelmed before most could even understand what was happening. Greg Hansen and his Marines tried to mount a defense in a cargo bay, but they were outnumbered 5-1, and the Velcrin had better weapons and knew their own ship perfectly. On the Valiant, Captain Morrison watched his screens in horror as his people were captured and disarmed and restrained. The boarding parties were cut off, and he could not help them without risking the Valiant itself. Then Shepard Vorn appeared on the communication screen, and his voice was no longer broken and struggling. He spoke perfect English with an accent that sounded almost amused, and he told Captain Morrison the truth about what was happening. The Velcrin were not refugees, and they were not victims of sabotage. They were raiders, and they had perfected the false distress call over centuries of preying on young species who did not know better. They studied their victims and learned their capabilities, and then they took their technology and sold their people as slaves to the highest bidder in the dark markets of the galaxy. Humanity had walked into a trap that had claimed dozens of species before them, and now they would pay the price. Shepard Vorn offered Captain Morrison a simple choice: surrender the Valiant and accept slavery, or resist and watch his people die one by one until he agreed. More Velcrin ships were coming, and they would arrive in 6 hours to claim their prize. The transmission ended with Vorn laughing, and the sound echoed through the bridge like a promise of everything humanity feared about the unknown. Darkness of space. Jake Morrison sat in his command chair and felt rage burn through the shock and fear. The Velcrin thought they were hunting prey, but they had made a terrible mistake. They studied human technology and human compassion, but they did not study human history. They did not understand what humans became when they were backed into a corner with no way out, except through their enemies. Jake opened a ship-wide channel and spoke 4 words that would echo through the galaxy for generations. He said, "Activate Protocol Phoenix, all hands," and every person on the Valiant knew exactly what that meant. And they moved with purpose and determination, because humanity was done being victims. Protocol Phoenix was a plan that Earth's military leaders hoped would never be needed. But they created it anyway because humans understood that hope was not a strategy. The protocol was simple in concept but brutal in execution, and it meant using every advantage humanity possessed, including the advantages that enemies would never expect from a species they considered primitive and weak. Captain Morrison's first move was to buy time because the Velcrin fleet would arrive in 6 hours and he needed his people free. Before that happened, Karen Phillips took command of the Valiant while Morrison coordinated the overall strategy because they needed every experienced officer working at maximum efficiency. Danny Cole started broadcasting on every frequency humanity had discovered, and he was not sending distress calls but instead detailed information about Velcrin tactics and their betrayal. He sent technical specifications of their ship and recordings of Shepard Vorn's confession and warnings to every species, in range that the Velkrin were slavers and raiders who used false rescues to trap their victims. If the Velkrin wanted to hunt in the darkness, then humanity would shine a light on their methods for everyone to see. Aboard the Harvester's Dawn, the captured humans were not sitting quietly and waiting to be saved. Greg Hansen was locked in a cargo bay with 50 of his people, and they had been disarmed, but the Velkrin made a critical mistake. They assumed humans without weapons were humans without danger, but they did not understand that humans were the weapon shaped by millions of years of evolution into survivors who refused to die quietly. Greg used hand signals to communicate with his Marines, because the Velkrin were watching but not close enough to see subtle gestures. 3 Marines had combat medical training, and 5 engineers knew how to make explosives from common materials. A dozen security personnel were trained in fighting techniques that did not require weapons. All of them wore standard UESC environmental suits that were designed for spacewalks and hostile environments. Greg realized those suits contained components that could be repurposed into tools and weapons if you knew what you were doing. Oxygen tanks became fuel sources and magnetic boot systems became breaching tools, and even the biomonitoring systems could be overloaded to create small electromagnetic pulses. Lisa Ward woke up in the engineering section with a Velkrin guard, watching her and her hands bound with alien restraints. Her head hurt from whatever they used to knock her out, but her mind was already working on the problem. She watched the guard and studied the engineering consoles and memorized the layout of alien systems. The Velkrin were confident enough that they did not bother securing their stations from a primitive captive. Lisa's fingers tested the restraints and found they used a pressure lock system that she could manipulate if she was patient and careful. Back on the Valiant, Morrison implemented the second phase of Protocol Phoenix, which was the conversion of every system into a weapon. Human ships were built with dual purposes because engineers always planned for the worst. Mining lasers could be refocused as cutting beams, and cargo manipulation fields could be weaponized. The ship's reactor could be pushed beyond safe limits for short bursts of devastating power. The Valiant was designed as an exploration vessel, but humans always built things that could be turned into weapons if necessary. The armory was opened and every crew member received weapons training. Even the civilian scientists and support staff. Karen Phillips was a doctor who joined the Space Command to heal people, but now she found herself reviewing combat medicine protocols and preparing triage stations for a battle nobody wanted, but everyone knew was coming. Danny Cole made a breakthrough in his analysis of the encrypted signals the Velkrin sent. The signals contained navigational data for their fleet, and by studying the signal strength and directional arrays, he could calculate where the incoming ships were located. The Velkrin fleet was closer than they claimed and would arrive in 3 hours, instead of 6, because even their timeline was a lie, designed to keep humanity off balance. Morrison made the decision that would define everything that followed. They could not win a conventional fight against 5 Velkrin ships, but they did not need to fight conventionally. He ordered the Valiant to begin pulling away from the Harvester's Dawn slowly, like they were retreating. The Velkrin watched this from their ship and saw it as confirmation that humans were weak and easily frightened. They wanted the Valiant intact for capture, so they allowed the retreat. What the Velkrin did not see was that the Valiant was leaving behind a network of microsatellites that created a 3-dimensional sensor net around the Harvester's Dawn. Morrison was building a battlefield map with the precision of a chess master preparing for checkmate. The moment for action came during the Velkrin shift change, when guards were being replaced and attention was divided. Greg Hansen gave the signal with a simple cough, and 50 humans moved as one with the coordination of people who trained together for years. The improvised EMP devices activated simultaneously and disrupted the local power grid. In the darkness and confusion, the Marines struck with violence that shocked their captors. The Velkrin guards were tough with natural armor and superior strength, but humans fought with techniques perfected over thousands of years of warfare. A Velkrin warrior found himself shoved into an airlock, and another was blinded by chemicals from a repurposed fire suppression system. The humans used joint locks and pressure points and the simple physics of leverage to overcome enemies twice their size. Greg himself took down a guard using moves that turned the alien strength against itself. The cargo bay was secured in minutes, and now The humans had captured Velcrin weapons that they immediately turned against their former captors. The Marines began a methodical advance through the ship, with every corridor becoming a battle and every junction a tactical decision. Their goal was not to capture the vessel, but to create chaos and divide enemy attention and reach Lisa Ward in engineering. Every encounter was brief and brutal, because the humans could not afford extended firefights against superior numbers. They used ambush tactics and hit-and-run attacks and psychological warfare by making the Velcrin fear that humans were everywhere at once. Lisa heard the sounds of combat and made her own move. She had spent her captivity learning the Harvester's Dawn systems by watching the consoles and memorizing the patterns. Her fingers had worked the restraints loose over the past hour using the pressure point she discovered. When the guard turned to check on the combat sounds, Lisa moved with desperate speed. She grabbed a plasma torch from a nearby workbench and held it like a weapon. The Velcrin warrior turned back and found a human holding fire in her hands with eyes that promised she would use it. When Greg's team reached engineering, they found Lisa backing the warrior into a corner with the plasma torch, leaving scorch marks on the deck plating. The Marines secured the area, and Lisa immediately turned to the main console with a smile that was not friendly at all. She told Greg she could restart the Harvester's Dawn engines, but she could also override their safety protocols. Greg understood instantly what she meant, and he contacted Morrison with the news. The captain ordered all human personnel to evacuate the Velcrin ship immediately. The Marines fought a running battle back to their entry point, carrying wounded and covering each other with practiced efficiency. They sealed themselves in the docking tube connecting the ships and created a pressurized safe zone. Morrison gave the order that would define humanity's response to the Velcrin betrayal. He said, "Cut them loose and execute Omega Strike." The docking tube explosively separated, and the Valiant accelerated away at maximum thrust, leaving the Harvester's Dawn drifting in space. Shepard Vorn realized something was wrong when he tried to access engineering controls and found them locked out by code his technicians could not break. Lisa Ward was safely aboard the Valiant, watching through remote sensors as her work began. The Harvester's Dawn engines started their restart sequence, but without safety protocols, the power curves climbed toward dangerous levels. The Velcrin crew scrambled to regain control, but human coding was as foreign to them as theirs had been to humanity. The engines reached critical mass, and Morrison counted down based on Lisa's calculations. At 0, the Harvester's Dawn transformed from a ship into a star that burned for exactly 4 seconds, before collapsing into expanding debris. 200 Velcrin raiders who thought they were hunting easy prey died in an instant. The explosion was so powerful it registered on sensors across light years of space. The blast wave caught the lead ship of the incoming Velcrin fleet and damaged its shields, forcing it to drop out of faster-than-light travel early. The other 3 ships decelerated to help their damaged sister ship, and their formation was broken. Morrison opened a channel to the Velcrin fleet, and his voice was cold and professional. He offered them the same choice Shepard Vorn gave him, which was surrender or die. Then he added something that made the alien commanders hesitate. He told them humanity recorded everything, including their tactics and betrayal and slavery operations. He said those recordings were being broadcast to every species humanity could reach. The Velcrin could kill the Valiant, but they would become the most wanted criminals in known space, or they could leave and never come near human space again. The destruction of the Harvester's Dawn sent shockwaves across the galaxy that traveled faster than light itself through the networks of alien communication systems. Within days, humanity's first contact incident became the most discussed event in dozens of civilizations, spread across hundreds of light years. The broadcasts Danny Cole transmitted were analyzed by military strategists and diplomats and scientists who all wanted to understand this new species that had appeared in the galaxy with violence instead of peaceful greetings. Earth received the full report from the Valiant 3 weeks after the incident because quantum communication systems allowed instant messaging across vast distances. The reaction in the United Earth government was complicated because some people saw opportunity while others saw danger. Ambassador Patricia Cross, who led the theoretical First Contact Council, understood that humanity had revealed itself to the galaxy by destroying a ship full of aliens, and that action could be interpreted as justified defense or dangerous aggression depending on who was watching. Admiral Henry Blake, who commanded all of Earth's space forces, had a different perspective. That was cold and military. He analyzed the situation and concluded that humanity was tested and passed that test. Any species that survived contact with Velcrin raiders earned respect in a galaxy that was clearly more dangerous than optimistic explorers had believed. He ordered the construction of more ships, and the conversion of the entire exploration fleet into vessels capable of warfare because humanity could not afford to be caught unprepared again. The Valiant remained on station at the edge of human space, watching the debris field and monitoring for threats. Captain Morrison and his crew were changed by their experience because they left Earth as explorers and returned as soldiers. The first official alien contact came not from the Velcrin, but from a species called the Therian collective whose ship approached under peace protocols that Danny's systems barely recognized from old radio signals Earth sent into space decades ago. The Therian were insectoid beings, and each individual was part of a greater hive consciousness that thought and acted as one. Their representative called itself Harmonizer Zek, and it spoke through a translator far more advanced than anything humans possessed. The message was direct and simple. The Therian had operated in this region of space for 6 centuries and lost 3 colony ships to Velcrin false rescue raids. They wanted to thank humanity for eliminating the Harvester's Dawn, and they requested information sharing about human defensive capabilities. Morrison approached the meeting with extreme caution because humanity learned its lesson about taking aliens at face value. The meeting happened in neutral space with both ships maintaining weapons range and clear escape routes. Harmonizer Zek provided humanity with something invaluable, which was context about the galaxy they had entered. The Therian explained that roughly 2,000 distinct civilizations existed at various levels of technology. The Velcrin were known raiders and slavers operating from bases in lawless regions beyond the control of major powers. The Galactic Assembly, which was a loose federation of the oldest and most powerful species, maintained order in core sectors but considered frontier regions like human space to be outside their concern. Humanity's broadcast about Velcrin tactics caused significant disruption because dozens of young species realized they were marked as potential victims. Several elder species were embarrassed by revelations that they knew about Velcrin operations, but did nothing to stop them. The Therian were part of a coalition of middle-tier civilizations who wanted to establish formal anti-piracy agreements, and they wanted humanity to join. Morrison listened carefully and asked the question that mattered most to him. He said, "If we had surrendered and not destroyed that ship, what would have happened to my crew?" Harmonizer Zek answered without hesitation, and the answer was brutal. Slavery on black markets where humans would be sold as exotic labor, and their bodies and minds would be adapted through biotechnology for various uses. The Velcrin perfected this process over centuries, and few slaves ever saw their homeworlds again because most died within a decade of capture. The answer hardened something inside Morrison, and he thanked the Therian for their honesty. He agreed to an information exchange where Earth would share data about Velcrin tactics and vulnerabilities, while the Therian provided navigational charts and identified other hostile species. The Therian also offered to sponsor humanity's petition for protected status with the Galactic Assembly, which would provide some legal protection against aggression. But not all alien contact was friendly because the Velcrin were humiliated by their defeat, and they spread counter-narratives through dark channels of galactic communication. They painted humans as savage warmongers who destroyed a refugee vessel and murdered hundreds of innocents. Some species who profited from chaos in frontier regions seemed willing to believe this version of events because it suited their interests. Velcrin ambassador named Trademaster Kell arrived at a neutral space station to file formal complaints against humanity. He brought charges to a regional arbitration council claiming that humanity committed war crimes and must pay reparations. It was a calculated move designed to tie Earth up in bureaucracy and paint them as aggressors who could not be trusted. Earth sent Ambassador Cross along with Greg Hansen and Lisa Ward as witnesses to defend humanity's actions. The arbitration took place on Station Kepler, which was a massive diplomatic facility operated by beings called the Luminar, who specialized in mediation. The Luminar existed partially out of phase with normal space and appeared as shimmering energy patterns that communicated through mathematical concepts translated into various languages. The station was filled with dozens of alien species, watching the proceedings with interest because humanity's case would set precedents for how the galaxy treated young civilizations. Trademaster Kell presented the Velcrin case with practiced skill, and he showed edited recordings of the Harvester's Dawn explosion, claiming it was unprovoked human attack. He displayed images of Velcrin families and claimed those aboard were genuine refugees. He provided fabricated testimony from supposed survivors who escaped before the blast. His presentation was designed to appeal to emotions and paint humans as cruel aggressors who shot first and asked questions never. Ambassador Cross countered with methodical precision that left no room for doubt. She presented unedited sensor logs from the Valiant, showing encrypted military communications from the supposedly disabled Velcrin ship. Lisa Ward provided technical analysis of the false damage, proving it was deliberately staged to appear catastrophic while remaining functional. Greg Hansen displayed combat recordings showing Velcrin warriors with concealed weapons attacking humans who were providing medical aid and supplies. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source when a species called the Korvax provided historical records. The Korvax were reptilian beings who had no love for the Velcrin, and they documented 17 similar incidents over 2 centuries. Each incident followed the same pattern, with disabled Velcrin ships sending distress calls and rescue attempts by younger species, followed by the disappearance of entire crews. The pattern was undeniable and proved the Velcrin operated a systematic predation scheme. The Luminar arbitrators deliberated in their strange way by existing in accelerated time where minutes, for normal beings, represented hours of debate in their phased state. When they returned to normal space, their judgment was clear and absolute. The Velcrin operated systematic predation, and humanity acted in legitimate self-defense, and Trademaster Kell was guilty of submitting falsified evidence to a sanctioned arbitration. The judgment sent ripples through the station. Because the Velcrin representative was taken into custody facing penalties under galactic law, more importantly, the ruling established humanity's legal right to defend itself and set precedent that other young species could cite when facing similar threats. Back on Earth, Admiral Blake received the news and made his decision about humanity's future in space. The UESC began an accelerated militarization program with new ship classes designed for warfare instead of exploration. Training protocols shifted from scientific research to combat readiness. The Space Command opened recruitment centers across every nation, calling for volunteers to protect Earth from threats they now knew existed. The Valiant received new orders to remain on station as humanity's first permanent deep space outpost. Additional ships would join within months to create what would become Forward Station Alpha. The location at the edge of human space where the Velcrin attacked became humanity's first line of defense and a symbol of their refusal to back down from challenges. Morrison was promoted to Commodore and given command of the growing station that would transform from temporary outpost into permanent installation. Supply ships arrived from Earth, carrying weapons and fighters and defense platforms. Engineers began constructing a proper station around the Valiant, transforming it from a single ship into a military installation capable of supporting hundreds of personnel. Among the arriving personnel was Commander Alex Turner, who came from Earth's military intelligence with a mission to establish humanity's first extraterrestrial spy network. If the galaxy was dangerous, then Earth needed eyes and ears everywhere. 6 months after the Harvester's Dawn incident, humanity stood at a crossroads because the species that emerged into the galaxy as naive explorers were now recognized as a civilization capable of decisive military action. Forward Station Alpha had grown from a single ship into a substantial installation with 3 additional vessels joining the Valiant. The Aurora was a dedicated combat cruiser, and the Endeavour was a science and reconnaissance ship, and the Liberty was a supply and logistics vessel. Together they formed humanity's first fleet, commanded by Commodore Morrison from the expanded station. The crew now numbered over 800, including military personnel and scientists and engineers and even families of long-term staff. What began as a temporary posting became humanity's first permanent deep space settlement. Children born on Earth attended classes with views of alien stars, and engineers born on Mars worked alongside technicians from Europa. Humanity was spreading beyond its home system, but growth brought challenges that nobody anticipated. Commander Turner's intelligence division identified an emerging problem because humanity's victory over the Velcrin made them a target of interest for multiple groups. Some species saw humans as potential allies, but others viewed them as threats or opportunities. The first major challenge came from an unexpected direction when the Kryn Syndicate approached Forward Station Alpha with a proposal. The Syndicate was a criminal organization operating across multiple sectors, and their representative was a cybernetically enhanced humanoid named Boss Karev. Boss Karev offered a partnership where the Syndicate would provide protection and trading opportunities if humanity agreed to look the other way regarding certain shipments through their space. It was a test, and everyone knew it, because how humanity responded would define their place in the galactic underworld. Accept and they become complicit in criminal activity but gain powerful allies. Refuse, and they make enemies of an organization with resources across dozens of systems. Commodore Morrison consulted with Earth Command and Ambassador Cross, who now lived at the station. He delivered his answer in person during a meeting in one of the conference rooms with Marine guards present, but unobtrusive. Morrison told Boss Karev that human space was closed to criminal operations, and any Syndicate vessels found operating within would be treated as hostile. Boss Karev took the rejection with professional calm, but issued a warning that the Syndicate operated in this region for centuries, and new species who thought they could establish their own rules often learned painful lessons. The confrontation established humanity's position, but it also isolated them because several independent colonies that were considering trade agreements quietly distanced themselves. The Free Merchants Guild withdrew their proposal for a trading post, citing security concerns. Admiral Blake recognized the pattern from Earth because humanity was being tested through economic and political pressure rather than direct violence. He authorized Morrison to begin aggressive patrols of human space to establish a clear perimeter and demonstrate the ability to enforce it. The patrols led by the Aurora under Captain Nicole Grant encountered their first challenge 2 weeks later. A convoy of 3 ships claiming to be independent merchants attempted to cross human space using a trade route that predated Earth's presence. Captain Grant intercepted the convoy and demanded they divert around human territory. The lead ship's captain, who was a species called the Borlak, refused and claimed protection under the Galactic Commerce Accords. It was a legal gray area because the trade route did predate humanity, but Earth's protected status should allow them to regulate traffic. The standoff lasted 6 hours with both sides maneuvering and neither willing to back down. Grant knew that firing on the merchants would give the Syndicate a propaganda victory, but allowing them to pass would undermine human authority. She made a calculated decision when the Aurora used tractor beams to physically redirect the convoy ships, forcing them off their intended course without firing a shot. The Borlak captain screamed about piracy and filed a complaint with the Galactic Assembly. Commander Turner's intelligence network provided evidence that the convoy was carrying illegal weapons to a conflict zone, which violated the very commerce accords they claimed protected them. The complaint was dismissed and humanity scored another legal victory. But each confrontation raised the stakes because the galaxy was watching and opinions were forming. Some species admired human determination, while others grew concerned about this aggressive newcomer. The Vryn Ascendancy, which was the nearest major power, sent an official envoy to evaluate whether humanity represented a threat to regional stability. The Vryn were an old species with their civilization stretching back 50,000 years. Their envoy was High Observer Kalen Thross, who arrived aboard a massive dreadnought that made human vessels look like toys. The ship represented military technology humanity would not achieve for decades. High Observer Thross was tall and pale, and moved with deliberate grace because the Vryn had extended lifespans and used their time to master complex fields. Thross specialized in emerging civilizations, and his evaluation would determine whether the Vryn Ascendancy viewed humanity as worthy of respect or potential suppression. The evaluation was different from previous assessments because Thross did not just want to observe, but to understand human thinking. He requested meetings with military commanders and civilian leaders and scientists and even ordinary crew members. He attended educational sessions with station children and watched engineering teams at work and spent hours in conversation with Commander Turner about human intelligence methodologies. His questions were penetrating and designed to probe the foundations of human decision-making. Why did humanity choose to destroy the Velcrin ship rather than disable it? What philosophical frameworks guide human decisions about violence? How do humans balance individual rights with collective security? Commodore Morrison served as humanity's primary representative, and he was candid about human history. He explained the wars and atrocities, but also the progress and cooperation, and the constant struggle to be better than their worst impulses. He did not pretend humanity was perfect, but emphasized their capacity for growth and adaptation. The breakthrough in understanding came during an unexpected moment when High Observer Thross attended a memorial service for the 8 humans who died during the Velcrin incident. The ceremony was simple, with each name read and their accomplishments shared and a moment of silence observed. Then their names were added to a memorial wall where they would remain as long as the station existed. Thross asked why humans memorialize individuals when the species itself survived. Morrison's answer was direct and honest. He said, because to us every individual matters and we do not sacrifice people to statistics. Something in that answer resonated with the ancient Vryn, and his report to the ascendancy, later obtained by Turner's spies, included a key conclusion. The report stated that humanity demonstrates protective aggression of a young species, combined with unusual emphasis on individual value. They are dangerous, but not malicious, and reactive, but not expansionist. The Vryn recommended classification as a civilization worth preserving with active monitoring. The classification meant humanity was officially recognized by a major power as worth protecting. More importantly, it meant the ascendancy would not tolerate other species attempting to eliminate or conquer Earth. News of the Vryn evaluation spread through galactic channels rapidly. Species that were considering hostile actions reconsidered their plans. The Kryn Syndicate became more cautious about directly confronting human forces. Even the Velcrin clans, still embroiled in succession struggles, quieted their revenge rhetoric. But with recognition came responsibility, because the Therian Collective requested assistance with a piracy problem. Several mining colonies had been raided by unknown groups, and they invoked mutual defense agreements asking for UESC support. Earth Command debated the request because sending ships to protect Therian colonies would establish humanity as active participants in galactic security. Refusing would damage the alliance and make humanity look like fair-weather friends. Admiral Blake decided to send the Aurora with a squadron of fighters, but with strict rules of engagement. Defend Therian colonies if attacked and pursue raiders only within Therian space, and do not initiate combat outside direct defense scenarios. Captain Grant took the Aurora into Therian space, marking humanity's first military deployment supporting an alien species. The crew understood they represented all of Earth and the mission parameters were clear, but everyone knew combat never goes according to plan. The raiders struck 3 weeks into deployment, hitting a mining colony on an asteroid. The Aurora and fighters responded within minutes, arriving to find 2 raider vessels stealing minerals and taking colonists hostage. The raiders identified themselves as independent operators not affiliated with any major organization. Grant issued warnings and demanded hostage release. The raiders responded by threatening to kill captives if the Aurora interfered. Grant gave her tactical officer, Lieutenant Ryan Cooper, permission to execute a precision strike. Human fighters smaller and more maneuverable than raider vessels executed coordinated attacks that disabled weapons and engines without breaching hulls. The Aurora use. 18 months after the Harvester's Dawn incident, humanity transformed from galactic newcomers into an established presence in the frontier regions of space. Forward Station Alpha, now officially designated as humanity's first Sentinel station, had grown to accommodate over 3,000 personnel. The USC fleet numbered 32 vessels ranging from small patrol craft to heavy cruisers. Earth's presence in the stars was undeniable and permanent. Commander Turner's intelligence network, now employing over 200 analysts and field operatives, uncovered a disturbing pattern. Multiple species in the region were forming coalitions not against humanity specifically, but in response to changing power dynamics that humanity's presence created. The comfortable chaos that allowed raiders and criminals to operate freely was being disrupted, and those who profited from disorder were organizing to protect their interests. The first major confrontation came from an unexpected alliance when 5 independent warlords, each controlling small fleets and territories, formed the Frontier Compact. Their stated goal was to maintain independence of frontier regions from interference by emerging powers like humanity or established entities like the Vryn Ascendancy. In practice, the Frontier Compact was a coalition of the worst elements of frontier space, including slavers and pirates and illegal weapons dealers and mercenary commanders. The Compact made their intentions clear by attacking a human cargo vessel called the Prairie Wind that was carrying medical supplies to a Therian colony. The attack occurred just outside human-patrolled space in a region where jurisdiction was unclear. The Prairie Wind sent a distress signal before being boarded, and the crew of 43 was taken hostage. The Compact spokesperson, who was a mercenary leader named Warlord Dax, broadcast a demand that humanity must withdraw patrols to within 1 light-year of their home system and pay reparations for interference in legitimate commerce operations, or the hostages would be sold into slavery. The crisis landed on Admiral Blake's desk on Earth, but the response would come from Forward Station Alpha, Rear Admiral Morrison, who earned his promotion for successfully establishing the frontier presence, convened his senior staff. The debate was intense, with Ambassador Cross arguing for negotiation, while Colonel Hansen countered that paying ransom would embolden attackers. Captain Grant noted the Compact's forces were numerous but poorly coordinated, and relied on older ships. Commander Turner provided intelligence that changed the calculation because his operatives located the facility where the Prairie Wind crew was being held. The location was a converted asteroid base in an unclaimed system 2 days from Forward Station Alpha. More importantly, Turner's analysis showed the Frontier Compact was not as unified as they claimed, because 2 of the 5 warlords were already in conflict over resource distribution. Admiral Morrison made his decision, but it was not what anyone expected. He announced Operation Fracture, which was a multi-pronged strategy to simultaneously rescue hostages and destroy the Compact's credibility and prevent the coalition from reforming. Phase 1 began with Turner's intelligence operatives activating sleeper agents within Compact territory and spreading carefully crafted disinformation, false reports of one warlord planning to betray the others, and fabricated communications suggesting Warlord Dax was keeping larger shares of profits than agreed. The rumors were designed to exploit existing tensions and paranoia. Phase 2 involved diplomatic pressure as Ambassador Cross reached out to the Therian and other allied species, requesting they publicly condemn the Compact and warn that attacks on humanitarian vessels would be considered acts against all civilized species. Phase 3 was military action with precision rather than overwhelming force. Captain Grant led a strike team aboard the Aurora, accompanied by 2 smaller vessels called the Swift and the Dagger. Their mission was to infiltrate the asteroid base and extract hostages and escape before the Compact could respond. Colonel Hansen and 50 of his best Marines specialized in boarding actions and hostage rescue joined the team. Lisa Ward came along because she became humanity's expert in alien technology and was essential for bypassing security systems. The approach to the asteroid base was conducted under full stealth protocols. The Swift and Dagger deployed ahead, seeding surrounding space with sensor decoys and electronic warfare packages. The Aurora followed, using a captured Syndicate stealth field to mask its approach. The base was called Station Terminus, and it was a converted mining facility, retrofitted with weapons platforms and shield generators. Turner's intelligence indicated approximately 200 hostiles on station from different species serving various warlords. Hansen's Marines boarded through an auxiliary airlock that Ward identified as a weak point in the base's sensors. The infiltration was silent, using magnetic boots and hand signals to move through maintenance corridors. The team divided into 3 squads, with rescue led by Hansen locating hostages, and sabotage led by Ward disabling communications, and power and cover led by Lieutenant Cooper setting up defensive positions. The operation began perfectly, with Ward's team reaching the power distribution center and planting disruption devices designed to cascade through systems, creating the appearance of catastrophic malfunction. Hansen's team located hostages in a converted storage bay, guarded but not heavily fortified because the Compact did not expect a rescue attempt. Then everything went wrong when one guard noticed something and triggered an alarm before Hansen's team could neutralize him. The entire base was alerted with bulkheads, sealing, and hundreds of hostile forces converging on Marine positions. Colonel Hansen ordered Ward to activate sabotage immediately ahead of schedule. The power disruption spread through the station, plunging sections into darkness and disabling automated defenses. In the chaos, Hansen's Marines secured hostages and began fighting their way toward extraction while protecting 43 civilians. 50 Marines, outnumbered 4-1, held off waves of attackers using superior training and better coordination. Lieutenant Cooper's cover team set up a killing field at a critical junction using portable barriers and overlapping fields of fire. Wave after wave of compact forces tried to break through and were repelled. Cooper was wounded, but refused to leave his position, continuing to coordinate his team's fire. Lisa Ward, having completed sabotage, encountered compact engineers trying to restore power. She used a plasma cutter as an improvised weapon and her knowledge of the station's layout to outmaneuver them. She reached the main reactor and set it to overload on a 30-minute timer, giving humans time to escape, but ensuring the base would be destroyed. The Aurora dropped its stealth field and began assault on external defenses with Captain Grant. Coordinating precision strikes, Hansen's team reached extraction with hostages, but compact forces were closing from multiple directions. The colonel made the hardest call of his career, ordering Cooper's team to hold position as rear guard, knowing it might be a death sentence. Cooper and his 12 Marines understood immediately what was asked, and they acknowledged the order without hesitation. Their sacrifice bought precious minutes for evacuation shuttles to dock and load hostages. But the compact forces, mostly criminals, rather than trained soldiers, broke under sustained defense. Facing enemies who refused to retreat and fought with coordinated precision, the attackers began to falter. Several compact officers were killed, causing confusion in enemy ranks. In the final minutes before reactor overload, the compact forces began retreating. Cooper's team, battered and running low on ammunition, received the order to evacuate, and all 13 made it to the shuttle with less than 2 minutes to spare. Station terminus exploded 7 minutes after the last shuttle docked with the Aurora. The base transformed into an expanding sphere of debris, taking any evidence of compact operations with it. The rescue was complete, with all 43 hostages recovered, and all Marines accounted for, with only 11 serious injuries. But the victory was more than just successful rescue, because Turner's disinformation campaign combined with the station's destruction fractured the Frontier Compact exactly as intended. Warlord Dax, who lost his primary base and significant resources, was blamed by other warlords for the disaster. Within a week, 2 warlords withdrew from the Compact, and within a month the coalition collapsed entirely. The message sent by Operation Fracture resonated across frontier regions that humanity would protect its people with skill and determination and ruthless efficiency when necessary. The rescued crew of the Prairie Wind returned as heroes, and their testimony about the rescue team's professionalism spread throughout human space. Earth Command formally commended Hansen's team, with Lieutenant Cooper receiving humanity's first interstellar medal for valor, but celebrations were tempered by knowledge of what those 13 Marines were prepared to do, which was sacrifice themselves so others could live. As the second anniversary approached, Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck, reflecting on humanity's journey. The naive explorers who left Earth searching for knowledge had been replaced by a civilization that understood the galaxy simply was and survival required adaptation. The station had become a true city in space, with schools and hospitals and commercial districts and diplomatic quarters hosting representatives from a dozen species. Human children played a